Welcome to the show live and in person.
In the house. Welcome, Suen. We're so glad to have you here and in person. This is really, really amazing.
You got to tell us, what brings you to Los Angeles?
Well, all work and no play.
Okay, we like that. Okay.
The cases are national, so a lot of times I have to fly in. We have Crump has an office here, so we're working on a case right now with the Afeni Shakur Trust. So we'll figure it out. But I'm happy to be here with Soulmates, and I'm glad you guys are doing so well. You guys look amazing in person, by the way.
I know. We always talk to you. Yeah, we always talk to you through the screen. That it's great to be able to be here in person with you, like they said. But I kind of want to know. We talk about Ben Crump a lot. He's going to be talking on our show later with us. What's it like working with him?
It's a whirlwind.
Yeah.
You're never not working. We're always working because we consider the work that we do to be the most important work of our lives, and so we're always working.
I'm sure.
Okay, so Suen, we want to get to a lot of questions with you. You're a former DA, so I guess for the Soulmates, let the Soulmates know, what does a DA do? What are the duties of a DA?
Yeah, I'm a former assistant
DA.
District attorney, or in Florida it's called a state attorney, and I got a lot of heat. I got to tell you, graduating from law school as a black female attorney, saying I want to be a prosecutor, a lot of people were like, no, you should be a public defender. But to me, the criminal justice system needs balance, and that's really what the issue is. And so I decided to be a prosecutor to be that balance, to be someone on the other side. And a lot of times with defense, the client is already in triage. The problem, the charges are already filed. They're already, facing something. On the prosecution side, you have more discretion to kind of help. So
right. You have the power to kind of, determine whether or not that they've been overcharged.
Right.
Possibly. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. I have to ask you, what made you want to go into civil rights law?
Well, I hate to keep calling Ben's name, but it really was Ben. I was happily, being a criminal defense attorney and doing a lot of business litigation. And he said, hey, I'm going to start a national civil rights firm and I want you to join me. And it took me about 2 years before I finally agreed to it because so much had gone on. And I actually was pregnant with my first kid when Trayvon Martin happened. And so it took a big toll on me, and I was just worried about the work and where it would go and how it would happen. But in his way, he convinced me, and I totally believe in the work. And I'm glad that I took the leap to do it. I never thought it would be a bulk practice, but it is what it is. And like I said earlier, we work every day because we really do feel that it's the most important work of our lives.
Well, Suen, we are so excited to have you here. We're going to be talking about the Derek Chauvin trial. We're going to be able to get a legal expert's perspective live and in person. So we are all really excited about this. Soulmates, I hope that you guys are ready for this, okay?
Yes.
On today's report, we also have special coverage of the Justice for George Floyd trial with civil rights attorney Benjamin Crump, as Suen said.
Yes, now legal expert civil rights attorney Suen Robertson is back here to help us break down what's going to happen in the trial.
Black Lives Matter co-founder Dr. Melina Abdullah is here. Plus, we have your FOXSOUL's Black Report trending headlines.
Yes, we do. We have all that and so much more. So if you're ready, it's our voice and our truths. Let's get it.
To me, this reeks of conflict of interest.
Do we know if he actually waved a gun? We only hear one side of the story.
This just really did make me feel good that the justice system did what they needed to. We're going to keep following this story, and we will have the latest for you.
On day 2 of the Derek Chauvin murder trial, onlookers grew increasingly angry as they begged Minneapolis officer Derek Chauvin to take his knee off of George Floyd's neck. But Chauvin would not let up, and another officer forced back members of the crowd who tried to intervene. Witnesses testified today at Chauvin's murder trial. Witness after witness described how Chauvin was unmoved by their pleas, with the teenager who shot the harrowing video of the arrest that set off nationwide protests testifying that the officer gave the crowd a cold and heartless stare. The prosecution asked multiple witnesses to describe their horror at what they saw, buttressing the testimony with multiple videos, some of which had never been seen before. Many testified about feelings of helplessness as Floyd gasped for air, pleaded for his life, and finally fell limp and silent, his eyes rolling back in his head.
A man who was among the onlookers shooting at a Minneapolis police officer to get off of George Floyd testified today, saying that he called 911 after paramedics took Floyd away because he believed he witnessed a murder.
At some point, did you make a 911 call?
That is correct. I did call the police on the police.
Right. And why did you do that?
Because I believe I witnessed a murder.
And so you felt a need to call the police.
And I felt the need to call the police on the police.
Now, there were police there, right?
There were police there.
Okay. Why didn't you just talk to them about it?
I believe that they didn't. We just didn't have no connection. You know, I spoke to them, but not on a connection of a human being relationship.
Donald Williams, a former wrestler who said he was trained in mixed martial arts, including chokeholds, returned to the witness stand a day after describing seeing Floyd struggle for air and his eyes roll back into his head. He said he watched Floyd slowly fade away like a fish in a bag. Prosecutor Matthew Frank played back Williams' 911 call in which he is heard identifying Officer Derek Chauvin by his badge number and telling the dispatcher that Chauvin had been keeping his knee on Floyd's neck despite warnings that Floyd's life was in danger.
All right, let's talk about today's proceedings. Suen, what stood out most to you about today's testimonies?
To me, what really stood out was Mr. Williams' testimony that he was literally felt like he witnessed a murder, and that during that time he was calling out to the police saying, you know, that he's not breathing, George Floyd's having an issue, and he really was trying to engage with the officers to save a life. And he felt physically threatened that he could not physically intervene because Officer Tao and him were having a separate kind of altercation or issue while he was trying to warn them that George Floyd was struggling for his life. So it was interesting testimony. I think the most tense point came when he was being cross-examined and the defense attorney was asking him specifically if he was yelling expletives at Chauvin during the event, and he was. You know, I think that those expletives that he was yelling were kind of taken out of context by the defense, because the idea is he's trying to get someone's attention and they're completely ignoring him. So he kind of was escalating his language to get their attention and hopefully to distract them in order to stop, but it didn't work. It wasn't working. And so the defense kind of used him shouting expletives to say that he's angry or he's a bad person. But honestly, if you are watching a homicide and you can't physically intervene, it's kind of like, what else can you do but try to distract the person?
Yeah, I think that I watched the testimony today like everybody else did, and I feel like, the words that kept popping into my head were harrowing, and it's very emotional, and a lot of the witnesses broke down on the stand. The defense kept calling the people watching an angry mob.
Right.
Do you think that helped or hurt the prosecution?
I think it's going to hurt the defense in the end, because sometimes with trial, the dirty secret is you're doing whatever you have to do to win. You're making whatever arguments you have to do to win. You're hiring whatever experts you need to win. That's all. That's your focus. The problem is you can't insult the jury. And there's such a diverse jury there that they're not going to look at a crowd of moms, a 9-year-old, an older lady, an 18-year-old that's recording it and say, oh, yeah, that's an angry mob. That might have worked, maybe 10, 20 years ago if there was no video footage, if there was no pictures. You could paint that picture and try to fool us that, it was the Gulf War zone and what he was doing was necessary to protect himself and others, but not when it's on video, not when there's pictures, and not when the people in the so-called angry mob includes a 9-year-old girl.
With a t-shirt that said love across it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there were 3 witnesses today. We had Alyssa Funari, Darnella Frazier, as well as Genevieve Hansen, the firefighter. So I want to know from you, whose testimony do you feel was most impactful today?
It was the firefighter for me. She really was like, hey, I was walking by, and as an EMT and someone who is trained to render aid, I could see that he needed aid. So that kind of goes against the defense position, because someone who is a third party, and whether it matters or not, she's white, and she's like, I don't think what the officer was doing was appropriate. And so her, as an outside party not involved with that particular law enforcement agency, saying, listen, his health was at risk, everything that officer was doing was wrong, she's almost like an expert witness. Like, the defense can be more unlucky with having an actual EMT there witnessing what he was doing to say, that's wrong on all counts. We would never do those things. And most importantly, what he was doing would cause death.
Right.
You know, as we talk about some of the damaging things that the defense have to deal with, you just talked about the firefighter, right? Donald Williams, you know, they were saying he was using certain words, strong words. If it got to that point, the other police officers, if they felt threatened, they could have walked up to him and took care of that situation. They didn't do that, right? And on top of that, at the end of the day, I just really feel like the fact that they have to show the video over and over again, it's a constant reminder of what that police officer did to George Floyd that day. But all that said, what is the most damaging thing so far to the defense?
I think the most damaging thing to the defense at the end of the day is the theme of the state's case, which is believe your eyes. Because they're going to try very hard, the defense, to get jury instructions in there. There's technical issues. There's going to be issues of law, things that they're going to have to read and apply and think about. But if they do what the prosecution is saying and just believe their eyes, that after the first minute was the excessive force still necessary, after the second minute, then what about after the third? What about the fourth? What about the fifth? What about the sixth? When did it stop? When did it become excessive? And if they just believe their eyes, I think they can carry the case to where it needs to be. If they get caught up in the technical things, and not saying that law is technical, saying that the video really does speak for itself. He's sitting there with a cold stare, hands in pockets, ignoring everyone around him, including an EMT saying, hey, you're killing this guy.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Suen. You know, and I agree with you that I believe that Genevieve Hansen, who is the EMT, was the most impactful witness. I mean, Darnell was, you know, that was very strong. Everybody was very strong, but she was most impactful because, like you said, she could be considered an expert. She said that her exact words, she testified that Chauvin looked very comfortable applying the majority of his weight to Floyd's neck. She also went so much so that he had his hand in his pocket, like he was casual about it. And then she also states that Officer Tao refused to let her on scene and actually admonished her for attempting to come on scene and telling her, you know better, which is, she does know better,
right?
And what you're doing is wrong,
Exactly.
You know, so to me, that testimony, I agree with you, was the most impactful. I was sitting there with tears streaming down my face this morning, and just with my jaw in my lap, like shocked that we're actually witnessing this right now.
I think Donald Williams, he was the MVP though of the day. A lot of people on social media, his video is being like retweeted all over the place. I feel like he honestly kind of did the impossible. You know, Romeo, you brought it up and you said that they were trying to, you know, probe him and get him to break, but he stood firm. And did you guys peep that he had his undershirt said Black Excellence? Did anyone notice that?
I didn't notice that.
Yeah, so when if we ever get a chance to run it back, in his shirt underneath says Black Excellence, and I feel, yeah, look through that. You might not be able to see it in this one, but like go on Instagram and Twitter, and you can see that his shirt says Black Excellence. So I actually want to know, Suen, how did you feel about his testimony today?
I thought he did a good job. He was very natural, and he was very to himself, and I think that will play well to such a diverse jury that could probably see relatives they have in him. You know, he did do something that, as a defense attorney and as a prosecutor, I've had to talk to witnesses about, especially African-American witnesses, which is he's showing his emotion. He's not showing his emotion. He actually was kind of like smirking, which is a thing that I think happens culturally, where something is so bad, you kind of feel like all I can do is laugh about it.
Right.
And he did that a lot, which if you didn't have a diverse jury, they wouldn't get it. So it's fortunate that we do have a diverse jury that can kind of see, like, he's uncomfortable. He's not laughing because he thinks it's funny. He is smirking because he's very uncomfortable and he doesn't want to break down. So he's kind of, you know, shoring himself up.
Well, I have a couple questions for you. One, before the show started, you were saying something that the judge said to the witnesses. You want to speak on that?
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah, there's always going to be motions in limine, which are motions that happen before the trial actually starts, where they talk about what evidence is going to be introduced to the jury. And Judge Cahill actually specifically said that during the spark of life testimony, which is basically the prosecution's opportunity to talk about George Floyd, that the witnesses are specifically directed not to refer to George Floyd as a gentle giant.
Wow.
They're not permitted to use those words.
Really?
Right.
You know, and when we talk about and we look at this case, I look online, you know, we want to see the play-by-play, but they're saying that some legal experts say that Chauvin should consider testifying. Do you think that's something the defense will have him do? And is that a good thing?
You know, okay, so I really don't want to get in the defense's seat at all because I think it's a horrible seat. But I will tell you this. Because the focus is so much on his state of mind and what he was thinking, because we're like, what is going on with his face, hands in his pocket?
Yeah,
You know, if he testifies and says, you know, I was thinking about safety, I was afraid, or whatever, at least you have an idea for what his state of mind was. And I think that helps him, you know, if he can give the jury a narrative. If he doesn't testify, the jury is going to sit there and make up whatever narrative they want, which includes that he had a depraved mind, which is one of the elements.
If he gets up on the stand, that is the day. That is going to be riveting. I cannot. I hope that they do. You know, I hope that his defense attorney has him go up there. But here's another question. We asked you a lot about the defense, but the prosecutors, Matthew Frank and Aaron Eldridge, they gave an incredible, you know, for lack of a better word, performance today. What did you think about the prosecution and their line of questioning?
Yeah, I think their presentation was spot on. What they're trying to do is stick to their theme, believe your eyes, and they're trying to paint the picture for the jury of what was happening when they're watching the video, what the different characters on the video are doing, what they're saying, and also at the same time setting up the defense for the okie doke, because the defense is kind of buying into it by saying, oh, they're an angry mob. And then prosecution's like, okay, it's a kid, some old lady, you know, like, all right, angry mob it is.
Right.
So I think they're doing a good job of just presenting the facts and setting up the defense to make their arguments that will really insult the jury, to be honest with you.
Right.
You know, so something I was really interested in yesterday, we started talking about the jurors being sequestered. And so I was really, really, really interested. I don't know why I'm fascinated by this. How so they have to be, you know, locked up in a hotel room or whatever like that. How likely is it that they won't be able to see what's going on and see what's going on with the juries and the testimonies, the people going on trial, the witnesses, going on trial and things like that? How likely is it that they won't be able to see any of that stuff that's going on or whatever is happening, you know, while they're being sequestered?
Yeah, when they're going to get sequestered once they start deliberating. So that'll be at the close of evidence. So the sequestration part is really just to prevent them from watching news coverage and things like that, reading newspapers, talking to their friends giving them their opinion, because their actual verdict is supposed to be based on everything they heard and the law that they're given. So, you know, I think the most important part of sequestration too, which, you know, a lot of attorneys don't discuss or think about, is that they're bonding as well. And they're kind of like getting their little vibe in terms of who's going to be the foreperson, who do we rely on for this, who kind of is the person that we go to for that. And remember, I discussed it yesterday. There's a nurse on there that's they're gonna have a lot of medical testimony, and I think that she's gonna be heavily relied upon for that.
Yeah, I was curious to see. I feel like if I was a juror, I still would kind of like want to see what's going on, but I guess I'm not supposed to, but you know.
Yeah, they'll be directed on that. I'm sure they'll have TVs, you know, it's just one of those things where it's the honor system. It's like, hey, and then they're instructed that they need to separate that stuff as well. Like, you have to separate what you're seeing from what you've been shown, because they do get limited evidence. Like I said, they're not going to be allowed to hear this gentle giant thing, but we know about it. It's in the media.
Exactly.
So they're being spoon-fed evidence, you know, based on the judge's rulings.
Right.
Okay. That's interesting.